It's the middle of the day, and the sky is black. No sunlight has shone here in 5 months, and no humans live within 1,000 miles. But a man plants his feet in the snow and grips onto a sledge, waiting for the signal to leave him behind. The man fastens a battery-powered radio to the side of his sledge. Every minute, it sends his location to a NASA satellite orbiting above. He secures a rifle close to where he can reach it and a secondary emergency radio. It'll take a rescue team at least 12 hours to reach him. He sticks up a list of names. He waves to the propeller plane waiting on the ice, and inside, a photographer from National Geographic watches back from the window. He's been flown out to show the man how to take pictures during his expedition, but he wants one last photo for the man's wife back in Tokyo. The plane door flings open. A minus 51-degree wind chill batters the photographer's body and reminds him he forgot to dry his wet gloves. Within seconds, his hands freeze over and he soon contracts frostbite. 43 years later, the photographer's fingers still turn numb in the cold. And whenever he feels that pain, he's immediately taken back to the sight of the man standing alone in the darkness of the noon Arctic tundra. Groups of explorers have trekked to the North Pole before. People have died trying. And now, Japanese adventurer Naomi Uemura wants to become the first person to reach the top of the world alone. Uemura hears a whimper at his feet. The entire expedition only really needs 10 dogs, but he has 17 trusty ones at his side. A few of the dogs burst forward, but the sledge doesn't budge. Made of hard oak, it weighs 330 pounds. With all of the supplies mounted on top, the dogs must drag nearly half a ton in weight through the snow for 478 miles. He cracks the reins again. The dogs snarl. A few of them panic and become tangled in the harnesses. He separates the fighting ones, untangles the rest, but one of the dogs breaks free behind him and disappears into the snow. Spot 3 more chewing through their harness. Other expeditions are navigating the North Pole right now as well. The resulting shortage of dogs meant that for every good dog Uemura could find, he's forced to take 2 that are not familiar with such conditions. After a day's struggle, he learns which dogs turn to the left and which turn to the right, and which turn to the right when told to turn left, and vice versa. By now, he struggles to hold up his arms. Cold air leaves his mouth as he reads the list of names stuck to his handlebars. Six are the names of his older brothers. They grew up in a farmhouse in Tajima, an area in the south of Japan that suffers heavy snowfalls during its harsh winters. Uemura never grew taller than 5 feet 4 inches. He felt inferior standing next to his brothers. He's still on the same stretch of ice from where the propeller plane left earlier. He vows to make more progress tomorrow, unties the dogs and feeds them the diet of raw caribou meat and whale fat. He eats a snack, reads over his map, then collapses for a rest. Remembers where he left his gun. In the sledge, unloaded. The crunching stops. Whatever is out there now stands less than an arm length away on the other side of the nylon sheet. He stops breathing. A hole strips down the side of the tent and the snow roars inside. In the darkness, the white glow of an intruder's face is clear to see. Poking its head through the hole is the largest carnivore known in the world. He is trapped. The polar bear sniffs Uemura's back and snorts with excitement. It slashes its palm and brings the tent crashing down over him. Devours its meal. After a few minutes, it emerges, red blood smeared across the white fur of its face. The bear walks away from the campsite and the crunching of its footsteps disappears. Uemura lifts himself up from the rubble of the campsite. The tent is torn and the cardboard boxes once containing raw caribou meat and whale fat lie desecrated on the ground. One by one, the dogs return to Uemura. They ran away when they saw the polar bear approach, and soon they'll need feeding. Uemura pulls out the emergency radio to arrange a supply drop. Searches for a frequency. Only static returns. But then he looks up to the sky above him and sees a good omen, the aurora borealis. While at school in Japan, Uemura sulked home after a classmate announced he was going glacier climbing in Alaska, where he could see the northern lights. Uemura was too poor to leave the country, and now he's standing beneath them after having survived an encounter with the locals. When solar flares from the sun shoot out charged particles, they collide with the magnetic shield in Earth's atmosphere. This collision appears as glows of green, purple, and blue across the Arctic sky. But electrons from solar flares can also absorb radio waves, like the one Uemura is trying to send out. He'll have to call later. The polar bear may return when he's hungry, so Uemura packs the tent onto the sledge and fixes the dogs to the harness. Except he can't see the way forward. Ice blocks as high as 30 feet tower over him. So he pulls out his ice axe and scales one of the blocks. When he hoists himself up to the top, he sees the path in front. He expected the Arctic Circle to be like an ice rink, but for miles and miles. But in front of him are hundreds of more ice blocks standing in his way, protruding from the ground. He ropes himself down, pulls out a 3-meter-long iron bar used by Eskimos called a toe, and approaches the smallest block of ice obstructing his path. Before the expedition, a reporter in Japan asked Uemura why he travels alone. He responded that it is in the splendor of solitude that I can test myself, and one thing I loathe is to have to test myself in front of other people. Uemura holds the bar above his head and smashes it against the rock. A fistful of ice falls down. Uemura hits the block again and again and again until a gap forms just large enough for the sledge to pass through. He never travels more than 100 feet until he needs to hack through the next block and then the next one. He trudges over and tears open the boxes. Inside, deliverance. Seal, caribou meat, and material to fix the tent. National newspapers in Japan are paying $10,000 for every one of these drops. For 10 days, Uemura hacks through the ice zone. By now, he'd planned to cover more than 150 miles. He's traveled 6. On the 10th day, Uemura holds the radio to his face. For a brief moment, he pretends he isn't alone. When he reaches the top of an ice block, he sees something no living thing has seen in the Arctic for 5 months. And just beyond the next row of ice blocks is that flat ice rink he's been waiting for. He hears whimpering from below. He looks down to see a few of the dogs huddled in a circle. He calls out, but none of them look back. They're all staring at the center. He ropes himself down and hurries over to the dogs, shoves his way to the middle, and in the circle, he finds a female laying on her side. Next to her, puppies. He looks at the pup inside the tent and the mother at their side. She's growling too. This time, he picks up the rifle by his side and unzips the tent to join the dogs outside. All of them are looking in the same direction.
The meerkat distracts the humans while his sister sneaks behind. A 5G cell phone. With their winter den complete, the meerkat family now has access to Disrupt Plus. They can stream hundreds of hours of series, films, and podcasts. Plus, they've unlocked patron-only rewards. But unfortunately for the meerkats, electricity does not come easy in the wild.
Feet. Why don't you turn around and let them get a view from there and see what the field of view looks like.
He holds up the rifle, and his trembling hands make it hard to steady his shot. Pulls the trigger. It only clips the bear. It begins trotting towards the camp, and Uemura abandons precision and just hammers the trigger again and again. When the chamber is empty, he looks ahead to see the polar bear. He unties them, and they race each other to the bear. They tear the flesh from the carcass. Back before, when he was hacking his way through the ice zone, Uemura was forced to stop every 100 feet or so to survey the land in front. Now he only stops to set up camp when the dogs can't run any further. And where he never traveled more than 1 mile in a day, now with the dogs in full sprint and the sledge gliding along the ice, they cover up to 25 miles under the light of the new sun. It's still minus 33 degrees, however, and on 2 consecutive mornings, Uemura wakes to find a puppy who hasn't survived the night. But still, he presses on. Uemura has spent so many days worrying about the dangers above him that he forgets about what's lurking underneath. The dogs pound and the sledge thumps against the ice, and then breaks underneath them. Uemura glares down at the crack that's spreading under the sledge, and he screams at the dogs to pull to the right, but they can't move fast enough. The ice breaks apart and the black Arctic Ocean opens its mouth. The 6 dogs at the front of the pack fall into the water and are swallowed into the abyss. The dogs behind are dragged in too, but they step on the sinking bodies of the others to push themselves back onto the ice. Uemura leaps from the sledge, cuts the ropes to stop any more dogs from being dragged into the ocean, and the ice continues to crack further. Now the sledge is sinking into the ocean as well. One of the dogs is barking. Uemura looks over and sees it standing across a gap. The rest of the pack joins that one to safety. Uemura doesn't join him. He stumbles over to the dogs flailing in the water, and one by one he drags each of them out by their paws and onto the ice. Sees that the sledge and all the supplies sunk to the black abyss of the Arctic Ocean. The dogs huddled around him. There's nothing he can do. The man and his dogs are hungry and tired. The 6 animals who fell into the water have frozen to death, and now he's waiting for his turn. All he can think about is his wife. She's seen her husband for less than half the time they've been married. She waited at home when Uemura became the first person from Japan to summit Mount Everest. She waited alone when he rafted the Amazon River by himself, and when he solo climbed Mont Blanc and Kilimanjaro. He's scared to die in the Arctic, but he's more scared of not returning to her. He looks up and sees a plane in the sky, but he didn't radio for supplies before the sledge sank. The plane is flying to someone else. He jumps up, screaming and waving his arms. He has no flare to shoot, so he flails each of his limbs. The plane roars closer and shoots overhead. But then, the plane turns right. It descends lower and lower until finally landing on the ice half a mile away. Uemura has been saved by a NASA satellite orbiting 600 miles above. The battery-powered radio he strapped to the side of his sledge was sending its location to a control team every minute of the expedition. If the sledge had fallen through the ice while Uemura was hacking through the ice zone, then no one would have come for days, assuming he had simply taken a break. But because he was racing across the ice when the signal disappeared, the rescue team flies out immediately. They carry away the fallen dogs, the mother, and the puppies. But before leaving, Uemura asks for a pen and paper. As he glides across the ice, Uemura never forgets what's lurking underneath. 3 times he's woken by a crack and leaves his tent to find himself stranded on an island of ice. And 3 times he must build a bridge for the dogs and the sledge to cross. Uemura has traveled 478 miles over 58 days. The ice looks the same as it has for the last 2 weeks. He checks his coordinates to confirm where he is. It reads 90 degrees north, 135 degrees west. He jumps up and down for joy, then remembers it's probably not the best idea. Naomi Uemura, the first person to reach the North Pole alone, pitches up camp at the top of the world. Later that day, the plane lands, and photographer Ira Block of National Geographic checks his gloves are dry, then flings open the door, runs down to meet Uemura on the ice. He later writes that he's never seen such a happy person in his life. Even the dogs look happy, he notes. When asked how he feels, Uemura smiles and says,
幸せ